Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast. And guess what? Formula One's back. That's all we're going to look at this week. That's all we're going to talk about, really. There's a little bit to go through. And if Formula One or anything to go by, they said Max Verstappen has started the season where he left off. Is that true, Tiff? Let's hope not, because there's a lot of controversy.
No, technically it's true, because technically he ended the season winning and he was fastest on day 3 in the testing, which of course doesn't mean anything because we don't know. We'll have a look at that in a minute. But that's a massive weekend there, because not just Formula One. At the end of the show, we'll look forward to World Endurance Sports Cars kicking off in Sebring. There's Moto GP this weekend. There's Indycar. Hell of a lot of motorsport this weekend. But yes, it's mainly all about Formula One is back. And I can't wait to see that first qualifying session, because as we know, that test session doesn't tell us. But it seemed to be all about side pods all this week, didn't it?
It's really weird. I mean, for those of you that haven't seen it, Mercedes came out with the most unusual side pod design you've ever seen, ever. I mean, they're trying to do a Ross Brawn, what he did with his team famously.
That was the lovely quote. What he actually said, Ross Brawn said he didn't see that coming. So it is possible that Mercedes have done a Brawn on Brawn, which would be lovely. But they haven't exactly shown that they're super quick. A lot of fuss about the side. Are they legal? You know, for the moment, it doesn't even look like they work properly. So I won't worry too much about them yet. But
there was Christian Horner already. I don't think he's started to endear himself at the beginning of the season being humble at all, because he said they're illegal, apparently, to a very well-seasoned German journalist.
Red Bull. So nobody said that from Red Bull. Nobody said it. Oh,
he's not doing himself any favors. He needs to. Look, he is a nice guy, and he's. I've met him, and he's always had time, but you've got to understand. It's not just your team. There are other teams in this as well, and other fans as well. So
we've got to move on. We've got to move on from the shambles of last year.
And what did it tell us? There seemed to be a lot of sandbagging. You just said that you don't really know too much who's going to be fastest, but George Russell and more particularly Lewis Hamilton, crikey, wasn't even in the top 10 in the fastest times.
We'll go through the teams in a minute and sort of see how they shape up and how we thought they went from testing. Because as you say, we don't really know, although, as you said, Lewis was being very pessimistic about it all. Pat Simmons, who did the rules on with Ross Brawn, he thinks that, what they've created is allowing cars to follow closer. But then read all through that sort of good news to the last line of his quotes where it says, but DRS will remain. And I think a lot of people thought, I hope that, this would get rid of DRS, but it quite obviously hasn't. So they'll be able to follow closer. This is hope. The other thing that's coming out of it that's a bit disappointing, they're heavier yet again, more safety measures and different reasons. I'm not sure why. I haven't read into why they're heavier again. And the thing about ground effect, it works at high speeds, but not at low speeds. All the drivers have complained they're a bit ponderous and they're even heavy around the slow speed corners, which is a bit disappointing, although it means they'll have to brake more for slow speed corners. So hopefully they'll lengthen the braking zones into tight corners, which should help overtaking. But it seems like on fast corners, they're as quick as the old cars were with this. So the aero is working at high speed, but they're very clumsy at low speed, which the drivers don't seem to like. But there
was a new lap record at Bahrain, so it means that they are faster. Well, running like that anyway.
But they go quicker. I didn't notice that. They're not the quickest time ever. I didn't check that out.
Ever, so they are a little bit faster. But there was a lot of porpoising as well. Do you want to explain to our listeners and viewers the porpoising?
Well, we had that in the testing in Barcelona. Is when the car gets sucked into the ground by the aero, but it gets too close to the ground, so it chokes the airflow, so it loses its downforce, and then it sucks it back down again, then it loses. I had it on testing on March 821, I think it was, at Silverstone from Magnussen. I was pogoed out. I couldn't even see halfway down the straight at Silverstone. I had to come out on throttle. The early days of ground effect, porpoising was a big thing. I mean, now it's almost gently bouncing as opposed to what it was back in the 80s and 90s.
It didn't look very gentle to me. It looked like they were headbanging.
The other new news, though, Haas have got Kevin Magnussen, so that's the other news of the week that was new at testing. So obviously they lost their Russian. I don't think anybody's sad to see the back of Mazepin. I don't think he was ever quite quick enough to be a Grand Prix driver. but he
they
certainly
haven't
had
just
enough
got
rubles.
him back, but they've all enough rubles. They haven't just got him back. He was fastest on day 2. Well, who would have ever?
Well, that just sums up the stupidity of testing, doesn't it? You know, he had the best of conditions. I think he was out. They had it 1 hour later because they were running. They missed the first half day of testing, so they allowed them to run on their own. So Kevin put in this lap time. I was a bit of a sort of, you know, I've always campaigned when seats come available, we need young talent. That's always sort of my reaction. You know, we're seeing like your friend Oscar Piastri still sitting on a bench. We'd love to see him in Formula One. But Kevin's an old, I mean, I love Kevin Magnussen. He's old, he loves the sport. He says what he thinks. He drives aggressively. And he didn't have a very good Grand Prix career, stuck with Haas as it was. So it's a one occasion I don't mind seeing a driver coming back from the outside. And I think he's pretty good for the team because obviously they need a bit of experience with the new cars. And I think Schumacher's, it's going to be a really good test. We'll come again when we talk about the teams, you know, for Schumacher. So I'm welcoming Kevin back. I did some polls and everybody wanted the Hulkenberg with the big favourite to come back. But I'm happy to see K-Mag back. He's quite a character. And the other thing, of course, there might be, we mentioned Oscar Piastri because Ricciardo's got the dreaded COVID at the moment. McLaren have asked Alpine, isn't it, to release Piastri to race for them next weekend, which is amazing, isn't it? All these contracts, he's an Alpine contracted driver. Apparently they've given the go-ahead, so Piastri could well be in the seat on Friday.
I'm really excited that you know that he's somebody that I'd love to see in the seat. But you know, it's quite interesting because I'm like you. I want to see young talent going into the sport. Or maybe not like on you because you just said that you're quite happy that K-Mag's in his position. But
on this occasion,
but it is also then, are we going to be tying up that seat for another 20 years for the young driver to come in and not have new ones come through? So it's a very elite field, isn't it, with drivers? Yeah. And I would love to see Oscar. Why wouldn't, if that was the case and they knew he was ill, and I'm sure it just wasn't an overnight decision, why wasn't Oscar there testing with McLaren this weekend? Couldn't they have got it through that quickly?
Good question. Yeah, they had the plan, you know, halfway through the testing. So why they didn't give him a few laps? But I think, you know, McLaren obviously don't, you know, want to give away their secrets to Alpine in a way. So I suppose they're putting you in the car until it's really desperate, you know. So, but he's got to have a seat fitting, and he's done no laps in the car at all. So it will be a very interesting debut if he gets stuck in on the last minute, having never driven the car. So a bit of intrigue this week. I mean, look at Ricciardo's recovery from COVID. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, go through the teams to see who you think is going to be the ups and downs of the season. I want your predictions now, Paul. We'll go just to really upset all the Twitter people who think I'm a totally Mercedes biased and completely anti everything Red Bull do, and I'm a complete Hamilton fanboy. We'll do the look through of the teams in the order of the Constructors' Championship last year, which of course Mercedes won. So we'll begin with Mercedes to show I'm completely biased against Mercedes. And I think they're in a bit of a mess. I don't know, you know, looking at that, the side pod caused a lot of controversy. They seem worse off for the porpoising. So, I don't know. They might suddenly pull it out of the bag. But Russell, George is up there. I think the interesting thing with Mercedes for me is that George is going to be much nearer to Lewis than Valtteri was.
No question.
I think George is an aggressive driver, which I think, you know, maybe have to be number 2 or not officially, probably obviously, you know, help Lewis to another title. But I think he'll be aggressive on opening laps, which is always Valtteri's problem. Valtteri was dropped back in those opening 2 or 3 laps and was, you know, they're never close to Lewis. So really excited to see how George gets on.
Yeah, but did you
see your
view? Did you see my view? I'll tell you now. But Carlos and George. So George said, "Oh, we're not going to be very competitive this season." And Carlos said every single season Mercedes say the same thing. In fact, George went on to say that he thinks Ferrari are looking the strongest. So I think that cheesed off our Spaniard friend a little bit. But my prediction is that I think Lewis will beat George in terms of 1-2 there. And you?
It's interesting. I think it's very close. I think George will out-qualify him a few times this year.
No question.
Max, of course, Max is going to dominate Red Bull. I think Red Bull look good. I think they've been sandbagging. Every session, you know, either him or Sergio were up the top 3. I think Red Bull, because I'm a big designer of Adrian Newey fan. And I think Adrian Newey, given, you know, he was a ground effect master designer, you know. So they've got Newey in their pockets. I still don't. I think Sergio had a good season last year. I still don't think he's any better than Albon or Gasly. Qualifying times, he's still not close enough to Max in qualifying. He's a good, solid race driver, conserves tyres very well, one of his sort of secret talents. But I think everybody, gives Sergio Perez, especially when he defended against Lewis in that. I think it was a race at the end of last season. I've forgotten that.
Yeah.
He's a great racer, but I don't think he's quite quick enough still to be, is anyone quick enough to go with Max, who I admire for his talent and skill, all you people that think I'm a Lewis fanboy. Incredible talent, Max. So, yeah, I think number 2 helping him to win another title. So, interesting. Ferrari, though, yes, Ferrari were always up there every session. And which of the Ferrari drivers do you think is the better one? There's quite a little debate there.
Do you know, I think it's Carlos. I genuinely do. I think he's,
you do.
I think he's experienced. I think he's calm. Vamos. I think
I still think Leclerc. I think Leclerc is going to come back.
Okay,
I think
I am making notes
season,
here, so we can have a little dinner bet on this,
Leclerc.
and we'd love to hear everybody's opinions down below. We'll put it in the comments so you can cut and paste easily and just use.
It'll be good for the sport. If Ferrari have a few wins this year, I don't know about the championship, but it'd be great. I think the world loves Ferrari.
To see Ferrari back.
I know the Italians, and so do I. It'd be great to see them back on the top of the podium.
At Monza, Carlos won and Leclerc, Charles 2.
Then we come to McLaren, who were 4th in the championship last year. I think Lando has got the pace. I think Lando is mercurial. Lando, to me, is along with Max and Lewis. I really do think he's the real deal. Ricciardo, of course, fantastic teammate, but struggled until he stole the Monza win from poor old Lando. Lando must have been gutted that Daniel won that race when he's been dominant all season. Of course, Ricciardo now's got COVID, so he probably won't be that fit even when he does get in the car this weekend.
Do you think Lando would be, sorry to interrupt, do you think Lando would be as good as Lewis and Max in the same car?
Yeah, I do. I think Lando's the real deal. I'm a big Lando fan.
Okay.
But who came fifth?
But he's not that much. See, you say that, but he's not that much. He's not that far ahead of Daniel. He always.
No, Daniel's fantastic. Well, Daniel's a 9.5 out of 10. Daniel's so close to being one of the greatest. I think Daniel's just a 9.5, whereas Max and Lando and Lewis are the 10 out of 10ers.
Okay.
As I think George Russell's a 10 out of 10er. So I think Daniel,
10 out of 10. I mean, hang on. Where's your limit here? Because for me, a 10 out of 10 is a Niki Lauda. He's a 10 out of 10. Ayrton Senna.
I think Max, Lewis, George, Lando are 10 out of 10ers.
How can George be a 10 out of 10 when he's unproven?
Just wait. It's my prediction.
Yeah.
Just wait. Wait and see.
And fact, they're different. So 10 out of 10 are the greatest of the great. The GOATs.
Yes. Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart.
Absolutely. Not Lando and George, as good as they are, because they're unproven.
You wait.
A future 10 out of 10, perhaps, but not a current.
All right, well, no. I'm just saying the skill is 10 out of 10.
All right.
Currently, they haven't been in cars capable of demonstrating their 10 out of 10s.
Okay, well, George has certainly got that opportunity this year. And for me, no question, Lando as well, in terms of...
Alpine.
Yep.
Can Esteban Ocon come out of the shadow of Fernando Alonso? And Alpine had a bit of an on-off test. They didn't have a DRS working in Barcelona. So they're a bit of Alpine. I don't think Alpine are there yet. I think they're going to be outside the top 10 mostly.
I think Alonso. I love Alonso, but I think he should give his seat to give his seat to somebody else now. Give
Oscar Piastri,
maybe. Exactly. Give it to him. Fernando, you don't need it anymore. Go and do another Le Mans or something.
I always thought Ocon was going to be really great, but I don't know. He's had a bad couple. He hasn't quite dominated because he beat Perez away when they were teammates. Ocon got on top of Perez, So don't know really. Then we come to AlphaTauri with the very talented Pierre Gasly. He's about a 9 3/4 for me. I think Gasly's a wonderful character, lovely French character, very calm, very quick.
He's going to be better than Tsunoda, surely.
I'm a Yuki fan. I think Yuki's got one more year. A big fan will come on to Mick Schumacher later. I think you get 2 years, and if you haven't really beaten your teammate in 2 years, then you ought to be back out again. Yuki was very quick in the junior Formula 2, Formula 3. He's shown these moments of brilliance, but just not often enough yet. So obviously won't beat Gasly. Gasly will still dominate the team. But if Yuki can get within a tenth of him in qualifying and some good race results, I think Yuki will deserve a third year. Then we come to Aston Martin.
But hang on,
Sorry.
how can he deserve a third year if he's still that far off? Surely.
A 10th. I said he gets with a 10th in
Yes,
qualifying.
but Tiff, this is our point exactly. It's such a small field. It's such an intense field. Why doesn't Yuki move aside for somebody else coming through?
Well, because getting with a 10th to
but somebody might get over a 10th if they have the opportunity. This is what I'm saying. It's so hard to get in. If you haven't cut the grade within a couple of years, surely it's time to move on.
Well, if he gets close, I'll give him one more year.
Okay.
And of course, I mean, we've got liberty, like a driver, don't they? That drivers are all around the world. So Japanese drivers obviously good for the money. And then we come to Aston Martin, a weird team. I don't know if Aston Martin are able to produce the results that maybe the car deserves. Because I think Sebastian Vettel is sort of, he's so distracted by political things, which is good. You know, he goes out looking for a greener world and he's supporting them, you know, against the war with his crash helmet this weekend. I'm not sure he's quite as dedicated. And he's got, you know, dear old Lance Stroll, who's a very good driver. He's an 8 out of 10, you know, who occasionally performs brilliantly. On certain occasions, Lance Stroll is outstanding, you know, in the wet in Turkey and places. So I don't think either of the Aston drivers is really, you know, up in the 9 to 10 bracket. So, you know, I think Seb needs to step back and give the seat away. And Lance, I don't know, as long as Dad owns the company and he occasionally has these amazing performances. I mean, neither of those drivers would be hired by Red Bull, Ferrari, or even McLaren, would they?
No, they wouldn't. And it's quite interesting. My argument about getting rid of these people after a couple of seasons, everybody would have got rid of Lance Stroll if his father wasn't. His father didn't own the team, and actually, he has come good. He's quick now, and he's consistent. So who's your money on in terms of Aston Martin? I'm going to go for Lance Stroll, you know, because I agree with you. Seb's. There we go.
Seb will still have enough effort. He'll make enough effort to beat Lance Stroll. Otherwise, he'd be too embarrassed by it all.
But I'm glad you think Seb should stand aside now, because I couldn't agree more.
His mind's not on the job 100%. Williams is interesting because this is, you know, another driver that might be revived. If Alex Albon, as I think he will, comes in and beats Latifi again and again in qualifying like George Russell did, you know, what's Daddy Latifi? You know, surely go and find an IndyCar drive. Go and buy yourself a sports car drive, Nicholas. You're a very, very good driver. I hate people rubbishy drivers. I've got a useless, total tosser. I mean, he's not. He's
one of the best drivers in the world. Literally,
he's an 8.5. Yeah, exactly. You know, and he would show up well in IndyCar. You know, where he would be an equal car and strategy takes more effective in IndyCar. But I think Alex, you know, really, I loved Alex when he did Red Bull. He couldn't get near Max in qualifying, but his racing performance, his overtaking, you know, he could have won 2 Grand Prix, both in Brazil and Austria, if he hadn't clashed with Lewis.
He didn't clash with Lewis. Lewis hit him.
Well, yeah, twice. Alex, yeah, it's great. He's a great character. And I think him to have another chance is really good. I think he'll dominate Latifi. And well, I know Williams might be sort of occasionally top 10 this year. I think they're getting ahead of Alpine, just trying to read between the testing lines.
I hope so. Right? It is such a synonymous brand with success in Formula One. You know, Frank Williams. I'm going to go. I would love to disagree with you, just be awkward, on that one. But you've got to go for Albon, no question.
Yeah. Then Alfa Romeo, of course, Valtteri Bottas. I'm just going to turn that phone off now. There we go. Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo team is interesting because this is another test for another young driver who's been promoted rapidly, mainly, I believe, due to his nationality. But we have to welcome Guan Yu Zhao to Grand Prix racing, the Chinese driver, who just after when he had 3 seasons in F2, he eventually won the title. Or did he even win the title? I've forgotten. Did he win it last year? I think he did. Or came second. I should have looked that up before we started. But he's just not inspirationally quick. You know, Zhao, he's just a journeyman. He's an 8 out. He's as good as Stroll, Latifi. He's that sort of range for me. So I think, you know, Bottas will quite easily get ahead of Zhao. It's interesting with these, just going back, this nationality that, you know, the global Americans like a Chinese audience. That's a Chinese driver. There's so much hubbub about getting American in now, isn't there? You know, and last week, Colton Herta. McLaren, bizarrely, announced they're giving Colton Herta a testing program. But of course, their driver in IndyCar is Pato O'Ward. Colton Herta drives for Andretti, you know, and yet McLaren are giving him a test program. It's quite obviously there's a bit of come on, let's get an American in. And Colton Herta, I think, is everybody's choice as a brilliantly talented young driver. It'd be fantastic to see him in Formula One. And poor old Pato O'Ward, the McLaren driver in IndyCar, is a Mexican.
I was going to say, you know why?
Because we've got
Mexican.
I know. So Pato must be thinking, well, no, I've got an American coming into my team, my competitor.
I always
so it
thought
is interesting.
Pato O'Ward must have been an Irish American with a name like that, by the way. I never thought he was Mexican until
They're both equally talented. I think Pato and Colton Herta are very equal. But that's interesting that McLaren have been somehow given a testing contract. So we think Bottas will push Zhao backwards, and I think Alfa will be bottom 10 again. I don't think they'll be that quick.
So if Bottas loses against his teammate, he's got to go, obviously.
No.
That's not going to.
And then come the bottom of the list, we come to Haas, of course. We already mentioned Kevin Magnussen coming in. Now Schumacher, this is the controversial one. People, I love the name, I love the idea, but I don't think he was ever quick enough in Formula 2 to deserve a Grand Prix drive, in my opinion. He won the championship by being a great race driver, never quick in qualifying stuff, but he was very, very good at racing. And I think Kevin's going to be quicker than Mick. And then I think, how much longer can he live on the Schumacher name and hold one of those treasured 20 seats? What we need is more seats. We need, Andretti to come in with a team they talked about. We need like 26 cars on the grid to get more youngsters in. But I can't wait. I can't wait to see on Friday and qualifying on Saturday and the race on Sunday. It's just really good stuff. Exciting as always. People think I'm never going to watch. Those people that said, I'm never watching Formula One again after Abu Dhabi. They'll all be watching Formula One again because it's brilliant. It's intriguing. It's, it's debatable. It's, Twitter mad. And of course, we've got both Formula 2 and Formula 3 this weekend, talking about young drivers, which is good. There's stupid triple headers that was only F2 or F3. So the young drivers only got to drive 6 of the tracks instead of 12 each year. So now we've got F2 and F3 back with a single sprint race, reverse grid, and of course the main race. Formula 2, we haven't really got. I'm sorry, Brits. There's a couple of you I mentioned. I don't think we're going to have a British Formula 2.
But before you move on, let me just qualify that you are going to go for Magnussen in terms of Haas for my list for our dinner that I'm about to win.
What, you thinking Mick will beat him then, do you?
In about 9 months. I just wanted to make sure. And in terms of Constructors' Championships that you're not interested in, but I'm going to get it from you. 1, 2, 3. I think it's going to be business as usual, isn't it? Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think the top 6, the big 6. And I don't know, McLaren didn't look that quick, did they? They had a bit of troubled time. Lando was a bit puzzled with his car. No, I can't. I can see those being the top 3 again.
Yeah, me too. Okay, F2.
So F2, just to talk about F2 quickly. 3 tips, I think. Liam Lawson, this Kiwi that was on top of some of the testing, I think he's very talented. He was a Red Bull man at times. I think he is a Red Bull boy. Yeah, Red Bull reserve. Liam Lawson, Théo Pourchaire, this young French kid, I think is going to be another talent to look out. They've both already done 1 season of F2, whereas the rookie is Dennis Hauger, this Norwegian, who won Formula 3, dominated Formula 3 last year. So there's 3 youngsters I can see being at the top of the F2. The only Brits we've got is Ollie Caldwell, who still hasn't quite done enough, I think, to really show he's got the future in Grand Prix racing. I might be surprised. Jake Hughes has been around doing stand-in Formula getting to the top. So no Brits really, I don't think, in F2 are going to challenge. Whereas in Formula 3, we've got 3 out of the 4 Autosport Awards finalists that we talked about, all in Formula 3. So in Formula 3, we've got some real British talent. Because we've got Zach O'Sullivan, who won the Autosport Award. So I'm sure Johnny Edgar and Oliver Bearman, who are beaten in that, will be out there trying to show Zach who's quickest in Formula 3. So that's really exciting, F3. There's also one other driver, Ayrton Simmons, is also doing it. So 4 Brits. Simmons, who came second to Zach O'Sullivan in the GB3 Championship.
Do you think his parents were a Grand Prix fan by any chance, a Brazilian?
There's so many Ayrtons. In the young drivers in motorsport, lower ranks, there's so many Ayrtons now from 20 years ago. So I think it's fantastic. The F2, and it's a great weekend television on racing out in Bahrain this weekend, which I can't wait to get. But then there's so much else on. We'll come to that later. So yeah, Formula 1 is back, and Formula 2.
And Formula 3.
And Formula 3. So moving on, we've got to mention Vic Elford passed away last weekend. Just one of the greatest all-rounders there's ever been. This guy
didn't he race in lots of different not just.
Yeah, that was well. Yeah, I mean, he won the Monte Carlo Rally, then flew over to Daytona, won the Daytona 24-hour race in the sports cars, and then later that season made his Grand Prix debut in BRM. I think it was BRM, Cooper BRM. Never really had a big career in Formula One, but he was like lightning fast. He was magic in the Targa Florio. He was a lap record holder, using his rally thing. He won the first ever rallycross event in the Porsche 911 down at Linden Hill, I think the very first rally. He did they used to have an 84-hour race around the Nürburgring, the Nordschleife, and he was with about 3 other teammates, and they have to literally for the 4 nights. They said, "Well, Vic, you're good at knowing where you're going in the dark." So he did 7-hour stints on each of the 4 nights of the 4-day race. And he did the British Touring Car Championship in a Porsche 911, bizarrely. He won the class, I think. So and he raced in NASCAR, the Daytona 500 he did, and just did so many different things. And a lovely gentleman that would be sadly missed.
Did you ever meet him, Tiff?
No, never met Vic. Quick Vic. But without
nice.
Doubt, nobody's got, he raced Porsche 917s at Le Mans. Nobody's had a career quite like him and had that
Fantastic.
sort of success across so many different disciplines. The only racing last weekend was at NASCAR, which I watched, of course, at Phoenix. Not the greatest of race, you see. I'm not always bubbling. Sometimes there are slightly duller races. A weird track, Phoenix. It's got, the sort of the triover, the infield bit in front of the pits, instead of with grass like all those other tracks, it's tarmacked. And when you talk about track limits, they just have wall to wall. You can go wherever you want. So on the restarts, they were going 7 wide. This is the most spectacular bit about Phoenix. They were 7 wide. So there'll be 3 cars staying up on the track, which has a small bit of banking. And then there were 4 cars on the flat apron, the runoff, taking a shortcut across. And they all merged together before the next corners. That was always entertaining at the restarts.
You'll be good at that. I've seen you driving on the road, so you cut in right to the last minute. And the Americans will be used to that. They'll be used to that. They've got motorways that are 7 lanes wide anyway.
Yeah. But it's a 1 mile over. It was tricky overtaking. I mean, you get these overtakes that take like 8 laps, and they're side by side, edging ahead and then back and edging. It was interesting, but never spectacular. But ended up with 3 drivers that never won a race before. This was the best bit, the end, with all the pace cars and things go on, and Carl Larson's having a drop valve in his engine. Otherwise, obviously, would have won again. We came up with Chase Briscoe, Russ Chastain, and Tyler Reddick. Never having won a race, any of them, battling for the finish, and Chase Briscoe won it. So, good story. A new winner. It's always good to see someone win their first Formula One race, sports car race.
How much that
whatever
as well. Winning a race.
So
I can only imagine, Tiff, what it must
feel
like to win a race.
First. You've got to get a podium first. But looking forward to this weekend, I'm going to be exhausted. I'm going to be watching Sky Plus times 30 on about 10 different channels, I think, this weekend, because there is so much racing going on. We've done the Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3. We've got IndyCar around the Texas Speedway, good, real high-speed IndyCar race. And sports cars are just kicking off crazy because it's the first round of the World Endurance Championship at Sebring. I'm not sure which order, because they do a 1,000-mile race, but it's the same weekend as the famous, which used to be a World Championship around Sebring, 12 hours. And next year, these 2 series merger. Because this weekend at Sebring, you've got a 1,000-mile World Endurance Championship race with 37 cars. Then you've got the IMSA race, which is the same field that did the Daytona 24-hour race. So you've got the IMSA 12-hour race later in the weekend with 53 cars. So, I mean, there's 950, 60, 90 cars from 2 sports car disciplines. I mean, this is what we're looking forward to in the future, because these 2 are about to merge for the next World Endurance Championship. At the moment, the World Endurance Championship has just got the same 2 Toyotas versus 1 Alpine and 1 Glickenhaus. So, the top of the field is still a bit dull and boring, and Toyota will win another World Championship. It's got 15 identical Oreca LMP2s and 18 GT cars. Whereas, the IMSA has got 7 prototypes. So you put the 7 prototypes, you know what I mean? So the top class in a year's time is going to be brilliant, but at the moment they're split. So 2 great sports car races over at Sebring. And then getting down my list of what's on, we've got a thing called Moto GP, which of course always entertains. 3 Moto Grand Prix, Moto GP, Moto 2, Moto 3 at Indonesia, where our lovely will be out there. Susie, we'll be out in the thunderstorm. She said, taking a bikini and umbrella, she told us. So that's Moto GP from Indonesia. So that's going to be early. That's going to be early morning, isn't it? Middle of the night for us. And of course, there's always the NASCAR race there at Atlanta Speedway. So I'm going to be exhausted watching motorsport this weekend and really looking forward to it.
Me too. Formula One predictions, podium, who's on it?
I don't know. I think it's going to be Ferrari 1-2. That's what I'm hoping for. Let's have a Ferrari 1-2.
Well,
yes, go on.
I can't see anyone other than Max standing on the top step. But Lewis will be there. He'll be there or thereabouts. But it's going to be fascinating. Can't wait. A few of you have mentioned our sound. Now we haven't got the most high tech of audio. It's
from my sound,
but it's actually the internet connections with us both because we do this over Zoom. So.
I paid for a lot of money. I've got fiber optics. It's your connection, not mine. Then.
I think it is.
Don't
today.
you? I paid money.
I think it is today. But so bear with us, and we are investigating other options of doing it. But otherwise, I've got to get in the car and drive to Tiff's house, which I don't want to do because.
No, I don't want you here. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks
Have a
for
great
joining.
weekend on the telly.
Yeah.
Cheers.
See you next week.